That works. Hey everybody, my name's Jimmy Berger. I'm a software developer with Domino's. With me are my team members Casey, Jake, and Levon. We're here to talk about things we wish we knew before we started our first developer job. I'm going to kick it off myself. I've just got a couple of points here. Number one was, I think, imposter syndrome we all understand, we all know about to lesser or greater degrees, but something that I think is important to understand is while imposter syndrome is difficult to deal with for everybody, I think the lack of it can be almost worse sometimes in a sense. What I mean by that is, when you're surrounded, especially in a field like ours with a lot of technically minded, intelligent people, it can be really intimidating for new developers starting off. Someone like me coming out of boot camp, hopping in with a bunch of CS majors and people who've been doing this for years, it was really intimidating. And during that time, it's important when you're starting out to not focus on what you already know, but on what you're learning, right? A big way that I dealt with that imposter syndrome was to, instead of just sitting there stressing out about what I didn't know, I really should have been focusing on what I was learning and use that as a source, as a reservoir of confidence, because while it's impossible for you to know everything up front, it's really important for you to start working on it as soon as you can, right? Pick a subject, learn about it, try to become an expert in it, move on to the next one. But the problem with that, the flip side of that is when you feel like something that I think everyone should look out for is feeling like you're good enough, right? Like that you figured it all out, that you don't need to, basically you've hit the peak, you don't need to work on that anymore. And I think that's a really dangerous trap that you can get stuck in. And it's something that I kind of wish I had understood up front. Because even starting out, yeah, you deal with imposter syndrome, but sometimes, a lot of the times, you'd be like, I personally would be like, I know enough about this. I don't need to worry about this as much. And you end up kind of looking like a fool sometimes because you get caught out not understanding that thing. So the best piece of advice I got, I think, going into development was you should always aspire to be you should always aspire to be the dumbest person in the room, right? You should always try to be the one that knows the least. You want to surround yourself with people that are more knowledgeable than you, and more importantly, are willing to share that knowledge with you. And if you kind of keep that attitude, no matter where you are in your career, you are open to constructive feedback, not even open to it, but seeking it out. I think that can go a long way to not just helping you improve your technical skills, but also just improving your career. Open a lot of doors for you. And I just wish I'd understood that sooner. It's really easy to kind of put up those mental barriers, put up that closet, whether out of kind of code in a vacuum, and just try to keep your head down and not draw your attention to the fact that you don't know enough or feel like you know enough. They're kind of two sides of the same coin. And it can really hamper your ability to learn more as you move through your career. And that actually kind of touches on or transitions into my next point pretty well, which is just the real importance of soft skills. Something I came from sales myself. So those were some skills that just kind of I already had from previous jobs before I made the transition to development. And it's kind of cliche, but the stereotypical programmer who just kind of sits and codes alone all day without really talking to someone is just very real. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes can be very difficult to work with. And I left sales because I didn't like it. I have a lot of social anxiety. So it can be very difficult for me to it's really easy for me to do that, right? Lock myself, like I said, into that kind of little nest of the cocoon of just, I'm going to sit quietly and develop. But just when you're out there in the field at companies, you're talking to BAs, you're talking to other developers, technical leads, project managers, scrum managers, TDMs. There's always someone that you need to be able to communicate with And not realizing that and letting those skills, I don't want to say evaporate, but kind of wither, was something I thought I didn't think I needed to worry about those as much. And really, that's something you need to, if you don't already have it, work on. And if you have them, maintain. It's so important when you're speaking with not technical people to be able to, dumb down technical talk for like a scrum master who maybe doesn't understand the technical side, but needs to understand progress in a project. Or on the other side of that coin, talking to a senior developer, you need to make sure that you're communicating everything clearly, especially in my case, when a lot of the times I don't know what I'm talking about. And if I'm being really clear about it, that is conveyed much sooner, and we can rectify that lack of knowledge as quickly as possible. So just, I wish I hadn't let myself coast on feeling like, well, I was in sales, I know how to talk to people. It was just too easy to let myself just kind of take a breather almost from those soft skills, but I should have kept working on them. It's like working out, right? If you can hit a point where you feel good about yourself, but if you don't maintain, it's going to go backwards really quickly. Speaking of trying to, of constantly pushing yourself, something that I really personally struggled with, and I assume other people do as well, that I wish I had addressed sooner, would be when you're troubleshooting, debugging, it's really easy to chase the try one more thing dragon. Like, you get into, I myself personally get really locked into a rabbit hole if I've run into a bug where I'm just trying, solution after solution after solution. And every time I think, should I ask for help or should I try one more thing? It's really hard for me not to try one more thing. And that could cost you a day. It could cost you multiple days. And it did, especially earlier in my career for myself. I would be making zero headway, but because I didn't want to feel dumb or ask for help, I just kept pushing myself to try one more thing. And, at that point, you're not only doing a disservice to your company by wasting their time, falling behind on your work, you're really doing a disservice to yourself, just sitting there, getting frustrated, not making any progress on this issue. Nobody benefits when you're pulling your hair out over an error you can't figure out for days on end. Pride also factors into this. It's perfectly natural to not want to come off as stupid. Believe me, I know. But asking those questions and being willing to set boundaries for yourself as to when you need to put something down and go ask for help is really important. And I wish I could get back the days I burned on my first job. I was in a hiring class with 10 other people. It was a semi-competitive situation. You didn't want to look like the weak link in the chain. So it was very easy to not want to show that to people, to show that I was stuck. Something I did that helped, and this is just for me, trying to figure out tools to break yourself out of that, I think is really important, especially for me. I'm a really visual person. I literally went out and bought an hourglass. And if I catch myself getting stuck on a problem, I'll flip it. And just having that kind of physical thing there for me when that sand runs out and I'm not past this problem, it's just a really good kind of way to break myself out of that chain, out of that cycle. And I'm like, okay, it's been an hour. I don't know where I'm getting here. And then at least at that point, when you do go ask for help, it's not just, please fix this. It's, okay, I tried X, Y, Z. I did some research on the problem and, saw this suggestion and that suggestion, but those didn't really work for me. You give yourself time to try and dig into it. But you also are kind of throwing in the towel to not waste time, which was kind of my next point and my last one. I'm not keeping an eye on time, so somebody stop me if I'm going past my allotment. But my last point was ask for help. Like, don't be afraid to do that. But I wish, and again, I wish up front I had known that it is still important to give yourself a chance to figure things out for yourself, right? That is a line that is really difficult when you're starting out to walk, right? How long, figuring out that balance between, again, chasing that kind of one more fix, chasing that dragon of just trying and trying and trying versus asking for help. Like I said, it's really important though that you challenge yourself and try to figure out this issue that you're stuck on, and not just try to make it better, but at least understand what you've tried. Like I said, I use that hourglass, and I try to, and what I'll do is I'll write down, because I've got the short-term memory of a goldfish. I'll write down little bullet points. I tried this, I tried that. And during that hour, once I flipped that glass, because I know if I have to flip the hourglass, I'm going to have to go ask for help. So after that point, I'm writing down what I've tried so that when I do go to a more senior developer, a team lead, whatever, and say, I have this problem and I don't know what's going on, I have that on a piece of paper, like I said, that list of things that I can show and say, well, I did try X, Y, and Z. Not only does that, to be honest, make you look halfway decent, like you're actually trying, but it's important that it's a great way to learn, right? Trial by fire. But I definitely didn't do that starting out. I just would get in these rabbit holes. I'd either ask too soon and wouldn't really learn anything, because not having someone hold your hand and just kind of fix a problem for you, a lot of the times at my first job, that's just kind of what would happen. We'd have a mentor come in, save the day, and we'd be able to move on. But I wasn't asking the right questions. I hadn't really tried to figure it out myself, and I didn't really gain anything from it. So yeah, the project got to keep moving. I was able to keep moving with my work, but there wasn't really anything productive coming out of it. And I think it's just really important, if I could go back and do it again, learning to figure out that balance between when to ask for help and how to make sure that when you do go for help, you have the right questions. 100%, I would go back and make those changes. I think I'm coming up on time. I imagine I've been going on for a while. So I'm going to tee up my teammate here, Levon, and take it away.
Thanks, Jimmy. Awesome advice, by the way. I actually just pinged my team lead to say that I may have gotten myself into a little bit of a rabbit hole on a task. So thank you. So a little bit about me. I'm a career changer. I do not have a bachelor's degree in computer science or related field. And I've only been a professional developer since June 1st of this year, which means two things. It means that I have never been to the Domino's offices. And it also means that I'm working remotely indefinitely now. So I am really living all of this, what I wish someone had told me in very real time. And that I just sent a message to my team lead. So there are four things that I wish I had known before June 1st. So one is to deeply understand how to use my tools. Two would be to get good at one thing, and I'll give more details about this as I go on. Three is to have good notes to refer to. And four is that I would, in fact, be working remotely indefinitely. So what I mean by understand your tools is having a deep understanding of using Git and browser dev tools and the fundamentals of setting up your environment. Having a facility with Git can really make all the processes related to working in a large code base so much easier. Which is something that is not often taken as seriously when you're working on smaller projects or with smaller teams. Another set of tools are the browser dev tools, which of course everybody's happy to talk about in interviews, right? You can list off all the browser dev tools that you know how to use. But as a junior developer, you very often have only scratched the very surface of those dev tools. So my experience so far is that digging in the developer tools and figuring out which component in the app isn't playing nicely, and pinpointing if the problem is empty data or code that isn't being reached or something else is really important. The importance of understanding the system on which the code runs. So if you're anything like me, when you first got into coding, you set up your system, you're really happy that it worked, and really hoped you never have to do that again. But when you work as a professional developer, you're really at the mercy of the powers that be to use whatever version they think is appropriate and upgrade exactly when they tell you you should, or all your things break, right? So if you have a good understanding of Linux or environment variables, system paths, version managers, linters, and sort of the other tools that make software happen, you will really save yourself a lot of valuable time. And not understanding them can produce a lot of inefficiencies, even if you're overall a really solid developer. So the better I can understand these things, the more quickly I can deliver on all the things that I need to deliver on. And the more often the questions that I ask my teammates can be relevant to the actual code and not just, wait, where is this supposed to be installed? When were we supposed to install that? How do we install that? So that's what I would recommend about understanding your tools. The second thing was getting good at one thing. So one area of struggle for myself personally is that I want to be good at all the things, right? Like, I'm going to be a full stack developer. I'm going to know everything. I'm going to write awesome documentation. I am going to join every Twitter and Reddit subculture. The only thing I won't do is join Discord just because I won't. But I am going to know every set of online resources, and I'm going to be up on every Hacker News post and all the little inside jokes that all the coders have. Like, that's going to be me. But that's not reality. You're not going to know every tech stack, at least not to start, right? So it was quite a rude awakening when reading job postings, and no job is for person that can do everything, right? Or like, do you know just like a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a little bit of this? So I really wish early on that I had decided, committed, more concretely to just getting good at one particular tech stack, really hone in on that instead of trying to learn a little bit of the front, a little bit of the back, you can always build, but if you have a shaky foundation, like, you kind of set yourself up to be sort of at a disadvantage, specifically at a larger company where there are entire other departments, right, that do documentation or that do testing or that do back-end work. And I wanted to work at a larger company, right? So again, that's my advice there. You can only build, you can build on one thing, you can grow from one thing, and don't despise that. Don't think that that is not sufficient. The third thing was to have good notes to refer to. When I first started at Domino's and I went through what felt like several weeks of orientation, but was not really that long, there were lots of different things coming at me. Here's how you log into this system. Here's how you log into the other system. These are the get commands for this. These are all the things that, get pull, get push, and all the processes. And I thought, I can't even remember who they just said I'm supposed to list on this pull request as a reviewer. Like, I'm not even going to be able to complete my first task. So I wish that I had humbled down a little bit more and realized that most of my teammates have either Post-it notes or keep a OneNote page or something of the things that they're going to like sort of semi-routinely need to do, just so they can refer back to them, right? So if you need to log into an app for work, you might have to actually write down what the test login is, instead of just trying to keep it in your brain. Same thing with who you're supposed to list as a peer reviewer, right? Like, nobody is expecting you to necessarily remember each time the 10 people that need to be listed. Sometimes you will, but there's no shame in writing it down. All right, so I would say it's really worth it to set aside time every couple of days and really just organize your notes. And those can be notes that are specific to a specific repository or a specific app or just another process. What are the different steps? I have painted my wall with whiteboard paint. So I've actually written notes to myself on the wall. It's like, don't forget to pull from develop. Like, just little things that consistently sort of messed me up, right? And speaking of being a junior developer at a new role, at a new company, you kind of don't want to have to go to folks with the same question every time, right? Like, they expect that you're learning. And they expect that you're going to have a lot of questions. I think I was told that I'm not expected to be useful until 6 months in. And so, like, they know, right? But there's certain things where I imagine they would like to see some growth, right? So is your computer on is something that you have to keep getting help on, or some other super basic thing. It's going to become really really obvious that you're not keeping the notes that you're supposed to be keeping, that you're expected to keep as an adult in the workplace. It's not different because you are a developer. So I would say the last thing I wish I had known is that my first role would be remote. So lots of companies are obviously remote right now due to the pandemic, and just in order to be able to attract and retain a wider variety of talent, many others are implementing sort of remote friendly models anyway. And I happen to love the flexibility of working remotely just because of the life stage that I am in. That said, as a new developer and at a new company, which is the same thing as saying like person with a lot of questions, right? I've had to get very comfortable with the notion of putting my potentially very embarrassing question in writing publicly for my entire team, right? So some of what is lost in remote work is just that ability to casually, run into somebody in the office kitchen, or to ask a question over a cubicle, or even just to see like, okay, my other teammates go see our boss about 3 times a day on average. So it's okay for me to do the same thing. When you're working remotely, you really don't get a chance to see how often people are pinging the team lead or pinging a fellow team member just to ask a question, right? So you kind of have no visibility into that unless it is asked in sort of a group channel. And it's really easy to get self-conscious, like, man, I have a lot of questions. And I know I do have a lot of questions and I should have a lot of questions, but it gets easy to feel like the number or type of questions that you're asking is somehow bad or wrong, right? Because you don't get a chance to see that your other teammate actually just goes directly to your boss every hour, in a private message. And you just don't have that same visibility. You also don't get a chance remotely to just sort of naturally form some of those casual relationships. Like, hey, I'm going out to lunch, you should join us. You don't get that ever. I eat lunch by myself in my office. And so you really have to go the extra mile working remotely to make those connections, to ask someone a one-on-one question, to ask about their kids if they have kids, ask about their dog if they have a dog. And that can feel super awkward. I mean, I've never even been in the same room with any of the people that I work with. And I just kind of am hoping that they're nice and that they have a sense of humor, because I'm going to crack jokes. And if they don't laugh, like really laugh, like ha, 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 right? Because you can't even hear them laugh. Then that sort of makes the work environment a bit of a struggle. So I would say working remotely, you really have to get comfortable with saying things in public that you might not otherwise say in public, and also just showing your personality and asking people to share of themselves sort of in writing in a way that you probably not used to doing with strangers that you work with, right? So I don't know, some days, aside from a couple of memes and the chatter on the communication platform, the days are pretty silent. And you kind of have to decide what you're comfortable with in that regard, so that it's not too lonely and that you are not losing those relationships. But it does take a different kind of effort, especially as a junior developer. That is it for me. I hope that was helpful. We have Jake up next, who's going to speak a little bit about his experiences.
Hey everyone. So thank you, Levon and Jimmy. Those are really good insights, I think. A lot of overlap with mine, I think, will happen. Hopefully I can offer a slightly different perspective. So mine's a little background on me. I have a bachelor's in software engineering and a master's in computer science, so more of the traditional CS major type of path. So my first job out of college, my first real job, was doing mobile development, and we always had a bunch of different clients. Like I would be on a new project maybe every couple of months, and what I wasn't really prepared for was how often requirements can change. And so this really taught me to write better maintainable and flexible code. So like it's much different from like your class where you have, here's what you have to do exactly. None of this will change. Okay, it's waterfall model. That doesn't really exist in the real world. So there will always change. And usually clients have no idea what they want. So always be flexible and be able to like change things around, or it'll bite you later. And which is one of the notions of like being kind to your future self. So when you write a piece of code right now, in 3 months, when you have to look back at it, or even 3 weeks, or even 3 days, because sometimes I forget what I even write. If you look at it then, you want to see, is it going to be hard for you to understand it or to go through it? Or like, did you leave yourself in a good spot? And that's what I kind of learned doing my first job there. And what Jimmy and Levon touched on about don't be afraid to ask questions, that's 100% number one. Don't be afraid to ask questions, but you should always at least try to make some type of effort first, or like Jimmy said, like you'll be kind of hand holding and you won't learn anything. You have to at least try a little bit and say, hey, this is what I tried. But getting tunnel visioned is a real thing. It still happens to me sometimes. You just want to solve it. It's just the itch you get. I'll wake up in the middle of the night or have a shower thought and like, I know the problem. I know how to solve it now. It definitely consumes me a little bit. So it's always a good idea to just take a step back, or even give a status up and say, hey, I'm working on this. I'm going to try this path. And then maybe somebody will stop you right there if they already know the answer. So, but there's definitely, especially from like the computer science background, I always want to try to like validate that I learned something in college, right? That I want to apply what I learned, but a lot of the times it's already solved, and you should humble yourself more and just always ask questions. The moment you stop asking questions is like you're not learning. And that's kind of how I transitioned from my previous job to Domino's. I went 3 years, and and another point I have is basically like the stuff you work on, or unless it's like bleeding edge research, it's I don't mean to sound grim or bleak or anything, but it's not really novel. The context will be different, and that's the fun part, what the context is in. But the actual problem, if you break it down, any big problem, you can always break it down to something that's probably already been solved. So there's a balance between taking what others have done to save you lots of time and to also learn and deep dive into things. You still want to deep dive and like understand how and why you should use these things and how they work, because that gives you a more fundamental understanding and you can make better decisions in future things. But the more pragmatic part of using libraries or things people have done is definitely real, because deadlines exist and you can't just indefinitely learn. But you should always be learning, and you should always be asking questions. And yeah, that's pretty much it for me. So I think Casey has a similar-ish background, and he'll talk to you more about his top tips.
Thanks, Jake. So, hey everyone, my name is Casey O'Brien. I've been with Domino's for just over 3 years now. In the workforce for about 6. I have a degree in computer engineering with minors in robotics and software. So I guess one of my biggest things that I wish I would have known was that soft skills matter just as much, if not more, than your technical skills. All the developers out there will have a certain amount of technical skills, but it's more rare to find someone with great soft skills. The main soft skill that I'm referring to is communication. It's easily one of the biggest factors for many mistakes, is just 2 people talking past each other, or someone just perhaps not providing the context for their reasoning or why they think something should be this way. Another attribute of communication is knowing your audience, know who you're talking to. Jimmy alluded to it earlier when he was saying, the different roles that you'll be interacting with. You have to know and tailor what information you're presenting to those specific people. And so it's really important that you're using the right verbiage and the right context, not providing, too much detail because they already know it, but not providing too little either. Communication is just more than what you're saying. It's how you're saying it. It's how you're presenting the information to each other. That's, some of the nonverbal stuff like body language and maybe tone, choice of words. I like to, so like in PR is one thing that I like to do is I like to talk inclusively, like to not like, so say you're pointing out maybe a glaring mistake that someone did, say, hey, I think we should actually do this way to prevent this and this. So I use the terms like we, like it's our code. At the end of the day, we all need to support it. It's not just the person writing it. So you don't want to make them feel bad and saying, oh, you did this wrong. So you just need to use that more inclusive tones. Another thing to keep in mind is that there's so many different personality types out there. So I took a DISC training earlier this year, which is kind of just how kind of gauge your personality. And then we did some training on how to like better communicate with different types of personality types. And I think that's really important to do. So like I'd recommend people going out and looking into it a little bit. You don't necessarily have to take a full-blown course or anything, but you're going to work with a wide variety of people. They're gonna have different backgrounds, different personality types, and you just need to be able to converse with them. There's gonna be people who you may not like, or everyone's had those projects in school at some capacity where they're stuck with someone that they didn't really want to work with, but you have to work with them nonetheless. You have to get that grade. Same thing in the workforce. Most of those people get jobs too. So you just have to learn how to communicate better with them and to accomplish the goals that you as a team are trying to get. So some other things to keep in mind are empathy, compassion, social awareness. You want to sometimes put yourself in someone else's shoes. Think of where they're coming from when you're discussing something. This kind of comes to when I was talking about people talking past each other. Sometimes you need to take a step back and you need to be the one to kind of lead the change in the conversation to come to a better understanding of each other's points and then come to some sort of agreement. To this end, sometimes you need to be able to try to read a person, read the tones that they're using, their body language, if they're feeling a little defensive or that, and then you kind of need to adjust to it, change your tone, change your body language, change the wording in responses, try to be maybe a little bit more passive in understanding, say, oh, I get your point here, and that definitely could be an issue, but I think if we do it this way, it can prevent that and we'll get more benefit. So just sometimes people really just need to be heard. So sometimes you need to be the one to listen. You can't just be always the person who's just talking over everyone. Sometimes you got to take a step back. And I think it's important when you're writing code, like for an employer, like you need to remember why you're writing it. There's going to be business reasons. As coders, we like to do the coolest things. We like to the latest and greatest new shiny library that comes out. We want to do all these things, but you need to remember that why you're really writing it. There's some business use cases. There's money on the line. So sometimes you're just not going to get your way, and that's fine. So one thing that we like to say at Domino's, it's kind of voice your opinion, but align to the decision. And this is actually something that I've had to really work on. And it's great. You just need to be able to learn from it and kind of move on past that. And also when writing code, so it's not just who you're talking to, but you need to know who your customer is. I didn't get this at first when I first heard this this phrase. I always thought, oh, our customers are the people who are buying our pizza, right? And that's true. They're the very end customer of Domino's as a whole. But there's so many smaller teams and departments that you have a large variety of customers. Customer could just be an upstream service who's calling the code that you're writing, It could be your product owner, because at the end of the day, they're the ones who are writing out these use cases for what you're trying to develop, right? Another really important thing that I like to lean into is that you fail and succeed as a team. So if someone's struggling, then the team is struggling. If someone writes a bug, it's the team's bug. We all own it. It's not gonna, not one person isn't gonna be the like the pillar that the whole thing can stand on. It's everyone's business, right? It's all of ours. So we need to own it and step up and help each other out. We'll all be there. And yeah, and I think these soft skills really are what lead to the difference between a programmer and a software engineer. Anyone can write code, but not necessarily everyone can have those soft skills to really be a better part of the team and kind of just kind of be there for everyone else, So this topic was touched on a little bit. So you don't need to learn everything. Not every one person knows everything. It's just impossible, right? But you can't be afraid to ask questions. I think the toughest thing to figure out is the balance between asking a question too early and waiting too late. So one thing that I personally do is I try to think, like, if I'm going to ask a specific person, I try to think in my head, if I ask them this, what are the first questions that they're going to have? Where did I start looking? What have I found so far? So I try to answer all those ahead of time, and I figure out the issue by just kind of going through those steps. And if you don't, then you're prepared for when you do talk to them. You never just want to be like, oh, I don't know what's going on. I didn't try anything. I didn't put any effort into it. I'm just wanting to kind of waste your time and see if you could do it for me. Like, that's just never going to fly. Another thing to keep in mind is nothing is magic. Some things are really tough to figure out on your own or even as a team. But keep in mind that like things are happening for a specific reason. Those reasons can be tough to find. But yeah, you just, sometimes it's just going to take some time. When I'm in those situations, I try to, kind of take a step back, try to really ask what you're trying to accomplish, what the actual problem is. Often people are chasing, they find a specific bit of information, like maybe there's an error in the log file, and the error, there's an issue that has to be correlated, right? Well, that's kind of false logic, right? They don't have to be related. There's probably tons of problems or errors in a given system. So you just kind of need to take a step back and look at all the facts that you have rather than narrow focus on a specific one. So another thing, I think it's really important to take breaks. That's short breaks throughout the day, but also like legitimate vacations. So you don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to spend money, but take a week off here and there. Consecutive time really kind of lets your brain unwind, and in the long run, it'll make you more productive. Along with that, having a good work-life balance. So one thing that's great about Domino is we can be pretty flexible. I can, hey, I'm gonna step away for half hour or so, kind of clear my brain. As long as you're kind of open with it, it's fine. And it kind of lets you reset and become even more productive when you get back. So I think I'm running low on time. So just another quick thing. So eventually you're going to have to do trial by error. My small tidbit of advice on that is make sure you're only changing one thing at a time. Too often people change multiple things, and you're not going to get, you're not going to be able to understand the specific fix, right? You could change a bunch of things, and they might be completely unrelated. So I think it's important to just kind of focus on one change at a time, so you know exactly if that worked or if it didn't. So a few quick, more technical skills that I wish I had a better understanding of. is, and they're kind of all connected, so I'm not going to talk too much on it, but error handling, logging, and debugging. So error handling in the sense that exceptions and errors and issues happen all the time in systems, but most of them are not critical. They're not going to break the system. It's not an indication that the system is failing. It's maybe one bad request. So you need to treat it as such. You need to log it at a lower level. And with logging, you need to really put the information that's going to help you solve and debug the issues that are going to happen. It's not an if it happens, it's when it happens. You want to log often, but it needs to be concise and specific information. No more like, oh, I got here in my code. Like, I mean, I remember used to doing that in college, and those types of logs don't really fly anymore. If you're getting, 100 requests a second, okay, you got there 100 times. How does that help you at all? So I just, it's just something to really keep in mind. And also just debugging in general is tough. There's going to be lots of great articles. I recommend you kind of go read up on them a little bit. And yeah, that's all I have. I think we've got a few minutes to open up for questions if anyone has anything. Feel free to unmute yourself and speak, or you can write it in the chat as well.
Well, this isn't a question, but I just wanted to say thank you for all of your insight about that. I think it was really interesting to hear about everything, like from how important it is to ask questions, and not just how important it is to ask them, but how even just the process of asking them is a whole skill on its own. And just like everything from taking notes to taking breaks to just all these skills on and the focus on soft skills as well, that sometimes gets lost in the kind of focus towards those technical skills. I think it's really important to focus on all of that and be just like a well-rounded person in the industry. So I thought that was really, really fun to hear about, and it's definitely super useful. And the whole thing with imposter syndrome, I know it's something that I struggle with every now and then as well. And a lot of people struggle with this. So it was definitely really awesome to hear insight about that. So thank you.
Yeah, appreciate you giving us the opportunity to pass on that little wisdom we might have gathered so far.
Hopefully stop someone from hitting the same stumbling blocks we have.
Exactly.
Or don't, it's your life, your career, do what you want.
Chad, were you going to say something?
Nope.
But yeah, thanks for the opportunity to let us speak. It was fun.
Sure thing. It was great having you guys here. So whenever you guys want to close out the talk, just let me know. But yeah, this was awesome. And I'll post the recordings to this, everybody, shortly. So keep an eye out for that on the YouTube channel.
Awesome. Sounds great.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank
I
you.
think that's it. All right. Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Take care.
Bye. Thanks again.
Always.